on Photography is a series of conversations with contemporary image makers, critics, gallery directors, and theoreticians.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome Anna Tihanyi to a VASA online photography conversation. Anna is an award-winning fine art photographer living in Budapest. She stages scenes to tell stories while exploring her own female self and femininity in general terms. She received an MA from communication at the Yate, did I say that right? Yate?
Yes.
Yate University, with a thesis themed in photography, stills in motion. She also studied at Photographus Photography School, majoring in experimental photography. Anna has received many grants and residencies, including a solo exhibition at the Robert Capa Photography Center. I first met Anna in Ljubljana, it must be, what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? When she was, I was doing portfolio reviews, and she was one of the reviewees. And she won a top prize in that photo festival. So Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Okay. And so let's talk about how you got into photography. What drew you to that? So how did you get started?
Every time I think about how I started to get involved with photography, it leads me back to the fact that I basically spent my whole childhood and still in the movie theaters. So I used to skip high school all the time and go to the movies. And I think this is what, first of all, this is what fascinated me the most, the settings and movie making. So I knew that it was, I always knew that movie making and like para-fiction and para-reality, I was always fond of it. But movies, what I was always obsessed, and it kind of worked to me as a healing process. So I always took a film if I was in a bad mood, so it's definitely the world of films. And during the course of the university where I studied film theory, and also I parallel started in the photography school. I just came across this staged photography idea or concept that I can create scenes and it doesn't have to be moving. So I find myself intrigued by these situations where it's just like frozen moments between transitions. I think I like transitions a lot, and I think it's the transitory moments what I was always interested in. Excuse
me? You
me?
found yourself settling in the still photography, but you had a love for film. Did you ever produce film?
No, I do work in film production, and I've started many years ago to do film stills and behind the scenes, and later on productions assistant, and in the last couple of movies I worked in art direction and in the art department. And that's really close to basically what I do, because I arrange everything for my own shoots as well, production wise, and I do props and I arrange everything. So it's very close actually what I do to film, but I somehow think in still moments. Okay. So it's a next step actually, because it's very. Excuse me.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's just that it's very recent that I have started. I have been, as I'm saying, that I have been really close to moving images or the idea of, or the movie settings. But it's very recent that I'm thinking about turning my still photos into somehow moving images in terms of sequences or even let alone trying directing.
Okay. So do you see your images as standalone images, or do you see them as a sequence of storytelling, basically? And here I think of Dwayne Michaels, for example, with a lot of his sequential storytelling projects where he basically moved the viewer through space or time, or etc. So it was kind of really a linear progression storytelling.
I think Dwayne Michaels actually is one of my favorite, but in those kind of sequences, it's very recent that I'm thinking about those kind of sequences, what Dwayne Michael does. I mean, I consider my kind of photography anyhow close to fine art or closer to fine art. And I think about movies as fine art as well. So I can't really, like, I know it's the medium is photography, but it's really related to painting and movies and other fine artistic symbolism. I'm just saying this because Dwayne Michaels is using text with his images as well, which I'm also really interested in. But those kind of sequences are actually just happening in my head. So before that, I thought of my images as separate stills within maybe even a series, but not in sequences, just separate stills. And now I'm much more into having them as a fluid. Yeah.
Well, let's look at then at some of your work, and I believe we start with the Berlin Hofmannhof.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I made a little introduction of the Berlin Bahnhof series. The whole idea was that I wanted to emphasize transitory moments from my own personal experiences, and I connected them with Berlin historical transitory moments, let's say. So they all take place in a fictitious Berlin through different relationships, mostly, and that's another recurring topic in my work. It's the female perspective, and mostly I looked at them through female aspects or female feelings, relationships. So I did the settings, I did location scouting. It's very similar to movie making. I do location scouting and I come up with the fictional character. I create mood boards at the beginning, even from color selection, clothing.
Well, let me jump in here. What I've noticed in your work is, for example, in the background, you got all these telephones piled up.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I mean those you placed there, and in the very first image, it was this completely stripped down room, basically, with a lot of space with the bed in the middle. The next image was with the woman, the pregnant woman, and I couldn't quite read what was at her feet. It was like almost looked like rose petals. But actually, you tend to add these little elements, right, which adds to the ambiguity, the mystery of the imagery.
Well, I'm very detail oriented, and so like to have the concept of these images, they definitely take months, let alone even more. But yeah, I think for the production for this series took me half a year or so. So I definitely carefully planned the details in advance. As you can see, it's really interesting. At the exhibition where I had my solo exhibition, there was this little boy who saw this image, and he said how interesting it is that the middle is split in the middle of the picture, and to the left in the past everything is beautiful. The roses are blooming, sun comes in, everything is much more lit up, and to the right in the future is much more rotting, much more ambiguity, darker with boxes, much more uncertainty, which I found an amazing description. And I didn't even know that I think it was a subconscious choice as well. But I do hide these kind of symbols and details in each of my photos. For example, the 2 clock doesn't show the same time, for example. And those are rose petals, though from a distance they look like she's losing her baby, and that's basically blood. But that's also the ambiguity that I have most of my pictures. Sure.
Yeah, actually, when I reviewed this work again, I thought it was blood, but I really didn't want to say that. You know,
I
um,
know, that's why I asked or.
I was uncomfortable suggesting that. But yeah, the roses. I noticed the clock on the table. I can't really read the clock on the dresser in the back. Uh, but it's amazing that how young was this boy?
I think 8.
Really? We ought to
Yeah,
sign him
he was
up.
very small.
Yeah.
It was definitely not his eye level at the exhibition. The picture is not at his eye level, so he was very small.
Okay. So you take about a month for each scene? We'll call them scenes.
Um, I think that's a good call for
Yeah.
them. I can't really distinguish because I I think the process starts with um, in this particular series I started to collect. I knew that I want to deal with. I knew that because I want this residency to go to Berlin, and I knew that I want to do something with Berlin and find a connection between me and Berlin. And the way I touched this topic was that I started reading Hungarian authors about Berlin experiences. And so I basically underlined a couple of sentences that reminded me of transitory moments, because I knew that, I don't know why, because I wanted to, I looked at Berlin as a transitory place, or I was in a transitory place, or I was interested in this kind of situation. I'm not really sure why, but that was basically the key element. And I use these words of the authors, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle that I put together with my own feelings. So I made a little list of my own transitory moments where I felt like uncertain, or yeah, like this kind of like this is about a love in vain as well. So I put all these situations in a list, and I put it together in a fictitious literal reference, and then I started to collect pictorial references. Like this one is very much like, I really like Hopper, the painter, so I started to research how he uses light, and how he uses his characters in space, and I started to build up these images. So I'm not really sure. I came up with 10. The series consists of 10 pieces, where I came up with 10 situations, and they definitely took me about half a year to think of the images on angles, what I want to do, and the production took me about another year or so.
How did you find the rooms? I mean, I was always intrigued with these spaces you worked in.
Well, I look around. I look around, and I also build things in it. So this was an empty room, and since I work in films, it's a bit easier for me to get all these, because some even though it takes place in a fictitious Berlin, some of them takes place in Berlin, and some of them take place in Budapest. But this one was in Budapest, and it was much easier to get furniture.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to do that. But I do go look around. It's I look for locations. I have images in my head, and I go look at spaces.
Well, you know, your work seems a lot, at least from my reading of it, a level of disappointment, a lot of not devastation, but of internal sadness. And at one point you said you also use it to deal with your own emotional framework. So is this coming out of your life in a way?
Definitely. I mean, they're all yeah. I think this is how I'm trying to process what's happening in my life, or what has happened in my life. And that's also a very important aspect, actually, you just rose, because when I'm trying to digest, and it's what I'm trying to process at this very particular moment, or in my particular series, what I'm doing now. It's definitely this transgenerational psychology, what I'm interested in, how I inherit things through, let's say, my grandparents or my mother, even to investigate my own female identity, or how I how I process my own self. And that's definitely connected through family. Is this what you were asking?
In a way, yeah. I mean, it's funny, you know, how family begins to fit into this, our emerging identity in a sense as we work through things. I always found this one intriguing too, because who would collect all those cans?
Fictionally, or how I did it
Oh
production
no,
wise?
I'm really not into how people do things. It's just like the image itself. But I mean, here, you know, here, I mean, obviously, she's reflective, she's sad, she looks tired. The image before this is with all the broken dishware. Um, you know, this kind of, and we've all, what I'm thinking of, it's tapped into how we all have these experiences of disappointment in life, right? Whether it's romantic or career or family, but it's almost like a level of sadness or disappointment. The girl on the bed in the very first image, with the person that she was in bed with still sleeping, but she has this um, look on herself. Just
Should I go back?
if you wish, yeah. I know we have a lot of work to see. There. I mean, it's almost the way she's clutching, the way you have her. We have to say not how she is doing it, but how you designed this, how you built it. Kind of clutching the sheet and almost in modesty. And there's nobody else in the room. There's no reason to be modest. You know, I find that intriguing about your work.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
But no, I'm just thinking, like, I guess if it wasn't, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, this is first of all, um, I got a little surprised that I think you're the first one who actually realizes there's another person in the bed.
mhm.
Which is a key element, which is actually this not being visible is a key element to it also. But there is definitely another person present or not present. I'm not really sure what to say to that. I mean, I do have yeah, these are basically questions in my life, I think. So that's why I'm framing them in pictures.
Well, as we move through your work, I mean, it's not just in your life, it's in all our lives, right? It's a commonality of experience that we may all have um, about feelings, about identity, about, you know, go back through some more pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's almost, yeah, I mean, this one and the last one you showed we were at of the woman's, well, this is interesting too, for me. Because you have the mouse traps with cheese in it. They look like cheese, they're already in
Yeah,
it,
they are.
which is the bait, right? It's the
Yes.
bait. And you got this young girl, and you got this stern mother, well, the woman, I assumed was the mother, or caretaker, had this stern look on her face, one of control and also one of discontent, right? So I'm kind of wondering what is she's, it's almost ritualistic, you know, some kind of cult worshiping where you're surrounded by, within a circle to keep out evil, okay?
Yes, I'm not really sure. I think this is somehow also connected by feeling to the protective, um, the the protectiveness of something that close you in. So it's kind of like a trap, but it's at the same time it protects you but keeps you in. So, and I think this is with this image, it's definitely connected, because the main idea here was as well to phrase home that's a warm, home that um, supplies you with um, certainty and routine and warmth and yeah, security, but at the same time it kind of suffocates you and closes you in.
Yeah.
But this one particularly actually is also related to all of them, but this one as well is also related to my personal fantasies. And this one is referring to my grandmother who survived the Second World War. And when I was little, I remember she always had dry bread in her pockets. And I never understood why she's keeping all this food with her all the time. But I guess this is the generation of the war generation that people got used to stocking up food. And
Yes. Yes. I mean, even my parents were Second World War people. I mean, they were already in their 20s, probably 30s maybe. But yeah, we used to talk about being very careful and not hoarding, but storing food because they never knew, right? And there's like food stamps in a sense that they had for buying particular types of food. So yeah, it's a whole other attitude or way of being that, say, our parents and grandparents all experienced. People going through wars, right? Well, you never
yeah, but
know.
somehow it just doesn't let you to be in the present because you're always anxious about the future.
Yeah. I mean, the pandemic just popped in my head to how at least people in the States were hoarding toilet paper. You know? You know?
Absolutely.
I mean, nobody knows why.
Why toilet paper?
Yeah, why? I mean, well, my cousins and family back in the States, we talk and they say, yeah, you go to the store and you can't find any toilet paper. So it's like people were hoarding it. Um, so it's like wanting. I guess people are also buying a lot of pasta, and sauce,
Pasta and potato.
potatoes. Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, I mean, I know. Let's see what else.
I chose this one to be. I think this is what I chose. Yes, the last one of the series because I thought it's a very strong link to my next series as well. That's called Save. I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit chronologically because this one is my most updated or my most recent series, but this definitely deals with childhood and yeah, the nostalgia for childhood and trying to investigate my connection to the female part of my family and very strong connection to my grandmother. Um, um, so, for example, that's her passport, and as I went through a couple of memories in my house, and I found bags after bags and notes and different papers and memories, different boxes. I actually found this embroidery piece with the actual needle in it, and I remember that I started with my grandmother when I was, I don't know, 5, 8. I'm not sure, 8 probably, and I stopped. This is basically where the embroidery stopped, and I never took it again. Um, and when I folded it out, it even had the needle in it. And when I folded the material out, these little strings, they came out at the bottom. They looked very much like roots to me. So yeah, I just found it interesting. And there's also this dress to the left is also very interesting. And with this series, for example, I did write a couple sentences as well. So I have text going along with, I didn't put it in this presentation, but on my website you can see that there's text going along with the images. And as a backstory of the dress is that I got this dress from my mom, and she told me that it was my grandmother's dress from the 20s, and she went out partying in this dress. And much later, I asked something about the dress, and my mom said like it was never my grandmother's, it was hers in the 60s. And I was like, okay, so I don't really know. I guess you inherit this kind of things, or like these are the family history or family stories that they change through time or with memory. I'm not really sure whose dress that is, but I remember that I wanted to at some point put on the dress and have it and starting to wear it as well. And I started to wash off because it was there's little beans or sequin. What do they call sequin? I think. Um, yeah. Anyhow, so I wanted to wash them off because they were really dusty, and I let them drip. I put it in my shower and I let them drip. And the next morning when I went to take it off, it actually froze into one piece. This material somehow kind of melted. I didn't use anything specific, but it became a very rigid, kind of like an armor thing. So I never had a chance to put it on, but I still have it. I keep it in my house as a kind of like a sculpture or something. But I found it very interesting that I can't really place it in time, or I can't really say that it was my grandmother's or it was my mom or it's mine, but it did become something that it kind of protects me now if I had the chance to put it on, because it doesn't function as a dress anymore, much more like an armor. So I find it very symbolic.
Do you think this is a function of aging? And I'm sure we all go through this. And lately we've been seeing a lot of photographic work of people going back to family history, to their own childhood history, reconstructing a history. I know one of your interests is identity. And so I'm wondering if for all of us, if it's probably a function of aging where we want to go back and learn more about our grandparents and great-grandparents, collect things they had, or stuff that I had as a child, the dollhouse, right? I mean, you know, all that. I mean, I'm just curious your thoughts on that. Is it a process of aging? Because we all are getting older, hopefully, you know.
I definitely find it interesting to look back at things, and like now I'm looking back at this dollhouse. It just, in this very moment, it gave me the idea or the feeling when I remember there was this pastry shop close to my house when I was little. And I remember it was so huge and it took me so long and so many legs to get to the ice cream part of the little shop. And it's actually, in adult terms, it's a very, very small shop. So if you go there, it's probably like 2 or 3 square meters. It's a very small shop, but as a child's perspective, it took me, it was really big and spacious and took me a while to get to where I wanted. So it's just an interesting, it's very interesting for me to look at this dollhouse, actually, setting aside that it has all the emotional background to it, that I got it from, it's from a dollar shop, from the socialism. I got it from my grandma. It meant a lot to me, but it also, I just realized, rephrased my way of looking at things, or my way of setting interiors, let's say, or yeah, how I played myself in my fantasy, or how I played living at all in a house.
Well, I'm starting to think about the rooms in this dollhouse. Connect back to your rooms in the Berlin series, the Berlin Hauptbahnhof, and that. What about the sugar cubes?
The sugar cubes is, I'm not really sure I can explain everything.
We don't want you to. I'm just curious because
the sugar cube has a nostalgic feeling to me. It's between the balance and not balance kind of question as well. But in Hungary, it was something very nostalgic in old people's house when you went, and I mean, it's something very from a peace era to me, you know, this having this little sugar cube holders with the little tweezers that you put in the coffee or the tea. And that's what my grandparents had in their house. And So I have this very nostalgic attachment to it, and just piling them up. I think I just like to hoard things. So piling them up, it's definitely the structure of balance, or yeah, it's a structure of balance.
No, essentially, you know, to talk about going back, items like sugar cube, right, were something that people couldn't find easily during the war or during the depression, right?
Yes,
Um,
true.
yeah. Okay, we probably should get moving on this because we are on Zoom and they do limit us. Aha.
Oh, true. Yes. Well, this is also connected. I mean, this is part of the same series, Save the Date, but it's also about. I mean, these pictures are all connected through me, but this is also this is my mom's hand, and it's called the game is called Cat's Cradle, which I found really interesting because I love cats, and the cradle from my mom's hand, but it's also like the protection and the kind of closeness. Um, so this is also again related to like family identity. Yes. So, and this immediately takes us to, if I mention identity and the female perspective, then this series, when I have just recently finished, and it's a part of um, a bigger series that I'm working on, and it's gonna take a lot more still. It's about archetypes and investigating my own archetypes and finding myself through, or just realizing these archetypes we have in ourselves through the collective subconscious and symbolism, universal symbolism. So this series is called Her, and it's the same woman through 12 inner aspects. So like 12 um 12 different roles, let's say. Yeah, this is how I'm trying to describe the identity altogether, or my problematics again. I think this is it. Yeah, this is the 12 women. And so this series, I wanted to do it as a trailer, kind of as I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, that I'm trying to have a step forward, closer to moving images, or not only moving images, but much closer to the idea of fluidity, or yeah, let's say let's frozen, last frozen. I mean, and so I wanted to come up with a trailer, since I'm working on this bigger series these are about the same 12 archetypes within one woman, but I'm describing characters through different details, including portraits, like one big scene. I always come up with one big scene, and I add different symbols or portraits or still lives, let's say, that described more that specific character. And I wanted to use the Her series I just showed previously as a trailer that could function as a trailer to get much more specific in the characters. I don't know if I make any sense.
What seems to be flowing through these two series or bodies of work is a certain kind of violence. I mean,
Violent.
very first picture you showed of the girl, it was like, it was blood, the very first one. No, going back to,
Oh, this.
where is she? One more, there. I mean, I read that as blood. I read that as abuse. You know, and if I look at the other pictures, I can kind of begin to build a framework to see them in, you know, especially like the, you know, these, and she's bleeding from the nose.
Oh, this.
Yeah, yeah. It was yeah.
I mean, I think violence is definitely, I mean, the more I'm probably conscious about, because, you know, we do have parts that are violent, and we do have parts that are stressed, and that's, yeah, these are parts of our identities, I think. And what the whole idea was basically to think about the characters that, the whole idea I had about women's chambers was when I came across this expression, character assassination, which abstractly mean to me that you're losing characters through external impulses, or you have, or during different interactions through different relationships, you end up losing bits of your characters. And so yes, violence is definitely, I do think that these losses or obstacles that we face during the course of our lives, when we digest them, they do advance us in a way, if we can manage to digest them. In
Well, what I'm thinking of now is not necessarily the violence, physical violence, even though we see the blood, we see the gestures, but more of a emotional or intuitive violence of losing one's identity, getting put into those cans that was sitting behind the older woman in the other series. You know, that basically you're starting to be the rat traps or the mouse traps of locking you in to a particular way of being. I mean, that's what I'm starting to read through this work and listen to you talk. You know,
I hope so.
Yeah. Huh?
I hope so, because that would mean that I'm actually developing in a way, or I'm trying to set myself free eventually, or understanding myself better.
Yeah.
It does have some sort of an action much more into it than this kind of frozenness than in the previous series. I think maybe this is what you meant.
Okay, let's if you don't mind, we can move on to the other work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this is the other work. That's basically the framework of the portrait series. And this is, I've only managed to do 2 characters in the course of 2 years already. So it's taking a while. And it's gonna, if I go in this space, it's gonna take me at least 10 more years. But I set my mind to it. So this one is about a girl or a woman who betrays or get betrayed by reality. So she feels like she put herself on stage, and within human interactions, she gets scars. And this oh no, sorry, I thought that I put another slide in here, but because I do think about there's also like different kind of connections. I mean, there's lots of symbolism in it, and the book that she's reading in the bathtub is Salinger's Raise the Roof Beam High Carpenters. That's one of the key elements in the book is the main character's suicide. And he explains how his human interaction, he's definitely an antisocial person, but through the book you realize that it's the human interaction that he gets the scars from. So there's like different hidden details within this series as well. And it's, of course, there's the reference to Ophelia, and Frida Kahlo's surreal painting in the bathtub, and this one in also like a Hopper reference that takes place in a movie theater. So it's always like the parallel life between reality and fiction. So this is what this character is about. And this character is about basically understanding femininity or I guess you can say sexuality for sure, but like body conscious and just being conscious about our own femininity and that getting betrayed.
Well, in this group of photographs, you broke away from the frame. You began to include multiple images within the frame. The other ones were all single.
You mean sequences?
Yeah, well, here you got 3 images. Is that how they're presented, or is this for today?
It hasn't been presented at all.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure, but it's the sequences, and I do like I mean this is what I basically have in my mind, to have them either as like photo novels or comic strips or or like a film strip. So I'm not really sure that this is for this presentation, but I do think about this kind of scatteredness, just like zooming in one of the, even though the main scene is that she's lying in this deserted field, you can zoom in different perspective, one looking at her from the car or looking at her zooming on her face. That's basically the idea, to move around the situation and look at it from different angles and perspectives.
Interesting.
And this is also like, this is another idea of camera movement or changing in camera movement, is to have a close-up, and when the camera zooms out, you see that it's a fictional jungle, and it's basically she's in a desert. But it's basically the same kind of so I'm referring back to the same kind of disillusionment what I did in the other character. And this is the progress. I mean, this is the work in progress at the moment.
Fascinating. It's fascinating to hear you talk about your process. You know, I mean, I come from the position that these are all moments of decisions compared to decisive moment. You know, that they're reflective of the photographer. To understand a photographer's work, contact sheets, in the old days of contact sheets, you know, when we had dark rooms, remember those days? But basically you can study how a person moves through a space when they begin to make decisions about in the editing process, okay? And here we see, going through your work, we're seeing more of your decisions made and how you approach particular thematic issues like identity and history. I find that very intriguing. And your work is intriguing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's because I'm doing the editing beforehand, basically. It's because it's so well planned beforehand.
So you storyboard it out, basically.
I can draw, but
yes,
that would be ideal.
Yeah,
yes, I do mood boards because I definitely, like, I put the sequences before I start shooting. It's basically a production plan. So I put the sequences like a close up on her face, a close up on her hands, a big total, I don't know what's it called, is the camera angle, when it's the establishing shot where you see the whole situation. At a different angle from her opposite angle.
So as you evolve, do you think you'll be moving into making films? Or are you going to stick with still images, or is that still up in?
That's still in the air, actually, but I'd like to move towards more intermedial. So it's very possible. I can't really, like, image-wise, I can't really think about movements, but I think directing is maybe closer somehow, not
Okay.
cinematography.
Because what I'm seeing, like, for example, on YouTube, is the emergence of rich creativity. It's providing platforms like YouTube and Vimeo and others for evolving or young artists or older artists, right, to have a platform for their work. There's a series put out by Dust now that's on YouTube, science fiction films. You find other LGBT film series going on. So it's because they never had access to the larger production houses, the cost of doing it, say, or to the audience. Here on, like, for example, YouTube, or what we're doing here, gives it a global audience. And I
Yeah,
find that really
hopefully
interesting.
it's
Yeah,
changing, and this is going to be much more accessible.
yeah, yeah. And format, you don't, need the big theater. Even though seeing film in theater with the sound and everything is a different kind of experience, right? Yeah.
I'm
So,
still thinking in classical terms, though, like exhibition space. I don't know. I'm much more conservative in that sense, but yeah, anything could happen, as you can see.
that's true. And I'm interested, we'll see what comes out of the pandemic. I'm sure, well, a lot of us are just stuck in the houses or playing it safe, which is smart. Where does that creativity bubble over? What are people doing? I'm finding a lot of young musicians using some of the emerging video technology where they can have like 5 images of themselves. And so it's a one-person band in a sense. And I find a lot of work, and also with Trump, there was a lot of creative political commentary about
Yes.
Trump. But so it's kind of interesting looking at and being aware of the creative energy and the work that people are doing with the emerging technologies, which in some ways make it simpler than the old days of going into a dark room and developing film and tapping up the dust, on the
Sure.
film.
At the moment, I think it creates much more anxiety, definitely in me. I mean, I can't react this fast. I
Yeah.
can't react to the pandemic right now. Like, I know many of my friends, they were creating things while we had the lockdown, but I'm probably going to react in 10 years. I don't know, 2 years, whatever. So I'm like, I can't react to that. It's probably the emotion, what I'm digesting at the moment, and we'll see how I'm going to build it in
Well,
wherever.
maybe that brings us to a final question or thought. What drives you? What pushes you to keep doing this?
Mm,
Okay.
I don't think I could be without creating images. I don't know if it's the right answer or if there's a right answer at all,
There is no
but
right answer. Yeah, just
um,
curious is because you are very productive and you're very thoughtful and you keep working and developing. And I was curious what drives you.
I'm not even saying that I have things to say. It's more like I want to get rid of, or it's not like I want to express things. I want to take things out of me.
Oh, that's
I
interesting.
can't, I can't, I don't think I can exist without, um, it's kind of like what drives you to think.
But I really want to thank you for taking part in this on
No,
photography.
thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, and you have a lot to say in image wise and also verbal. I mean, it's yeah, yeah. So anyway, so thank you very much.
Thank you too. And thanks for the interest in my work.